I would like to remind you to turn off any cell phones. And I also want to remind that this meeting is being live streamed and will be archived. Welcome to everyone and to our guests. Approval of agenda, that the agenda for the regular board meeting of August 27th, 2019 be approved. Moved by Trustee Hunda, seconded by Trustee Cosmerly. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. I'll call on the Director of Education, Norm Lazick.
So, Madam Chair, it's my privilege and honor to swear in our student trustees. So I would ask Colleen come forward, please. I, Colleen Govro, do accept the position of Student School Board Trustee Rainbow District School Board. Recognize my role and responsibilities as a member of the board and swear to perform my duties and obligations within the parameters set out by the Ontario Education Act and the Trustee Code of Conduct established by Rainbow District School Board. And now I would ask that you repeat the oath of affirmation. I, Colleen Govro, do affirm that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Congratulations. Now I've asked that you sit here where you can sign.
So, congratulations, Colleen, and welcome aboard. Thank you very much. Look forward to working with you. Preliminary declarations of... There's a motion. Sorry. There's a motion. That Colleen Govro, Llewellyn Park Secondary School, be appointed student trustee for the school year 2019-2020. Moved by Trustee Hunda, seconded by Trustee Morrison. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you again. Preliminary declarations of pecuniary interest. There are no presentations this evening. Report from in-camera committee of the whole. There was no in-camera committee of the whole, therefore there is no report. Old business, previous minutes. Motion that the minutes of the regular board meeting held on Tuesday, July the 2nd, 2019 be approved. Moved by Trustee Morrison, seconded by Trustee Stringer. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. There are no tenders. Reports and recommendations from board committees and new business, capital and accommodation plan. And I will call on the superintendent of business, Dennis Bazinet, to walk us through this plan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This evening, we will be reviewing the Capital Accommodation Plan, the initial staff report for the current cycle. Trustees will recall the last update that was given at the January 29, 2019. It was the report for the previous cycle. This evening, we'll be following the same format. So essentially what we've done is we've duplicated the report that was presented on January 29th, and we're providing some updates. Just to let trustees know that there are no recommendations contained in tonight's report. And all trustees should have a hard copy within their packages as well. The previous report, January 29, 2019, has been posted since that date on our board website. And we will post this evening's report tomorrow following the board meeting. So in terms of page 2, we start with our board policy, GOV 15, the student accommodation policy, and there have been no changes to this policy as the Ministry of Education has put a pause on any updates to the student accommodation process, and the moratorium on school closures is still in effect. So if you turn to page 4, in terms of our process, you'll recall on May 7th at the Strategic Planning Committee meeting, we had the presentation of long-term capital data, which essentially is the start of each of our cycles. So that would have started the cycle that we're reviewing this evening. On June 6th and June 10th, 2019, the director and I, accompanied by Heather Thurkel, went out and we had staff meetings with community partners to discuss partnership opportunities for the use of any excess space within our facilities. So we held 3 meetings, one in Sudbury, one in Espanola, and one on Manitoulin Island. And that brings us to this evening, August 27th, which is reviewing this initial staff report. If you turn to page 6, essentially this is presenting the enrollment of the board, total enrollment, so total average daily enrollment, pupils of the board, and fee-paying students. And this data is taken from EFIS, which is the Ministry of Education online application that all boards use to file information. And there are 3 cycles. We file the estimates, which essentially are the June budget. We file a revised budget by the end of December, and then we have the year-end financials, which cover us to August 31st of each year, and typically that occurs in the month of November. So when we look at the light blue bars, when we look at the period 2010, 2011, to the end of 2017, 2018, that would have been our last financials that were filed, so that represents actual students that were funded. So we can see clearly for that entire period, we are a declining enrollment board for overall students. The next 2 bars represent the information that was filed in the current fiscal year, 2018-2019, which ends at the end of this week. And we see that we had our estimates, and then we had a higher revised estimates when we filed. So depending on where we land with our actuals, which we'll know essentially by the end of November of this year, we may or may not level off and hopefully start to see the change. In terms of the estimates for the upcoming school year, 2019-2020, we see that the yellow bar represents the estimates that were used, and we always use conservative estimates when we go into the upcoming school year. So that will be updated when we file revise as well at the end of the calendar year. And I will take questions, Madam Chair, at any time during the presentation. So then we drill down a little bit and we look at the total elementary pupils of the board and fee paying. And here's where we see our good news story. So we could see that the light blue bars, which represent the actuals, that we did hit our lowest value in the 2015-2016 fiscal year, and that we've seen 2 actual financial year ends subsequent to that with increasing enrollment. When we look at the 2 darker blue bars, which represent this year's estimates and revised, we anticipate that we would land somewhere in between. Therefore, we would continue to see the elementary panel with an increase in enrollment. For next year, we've used, again, relatively conservative estimates for the 19-20 upcoming fiscal year. When we look at the elementary fee-paying students, we see that we have a little bit of a variation over the course of the actuals that were filed, and we see the slight variation between current year's estimates and revised, and we see that we're predicting an increase for the upcoming school year based on information received from the school level. So just a note that the fee-paying students would include our tuition fee-paying students from our First Nation communities, as well as any international students. When we examine the data for the JK pupils of the board only, therefore it would exclude any fee-paying students, we see the variation that's occurred over our actual year ends. However, we do see that since 2015-16, we've seen an increase in the 2-year following that period, and we anticipate that we'll land somewhere between the 2 darker blue bars and continue to see stabilization or a slight increase in the JK enrollment. Clearly, you can see that the estimates that are used for the upcoming school year are very conservative in nature, because essentially when you're predicting JK enrollment, you're looking at trends and you're looking at what our principals have heard for their surrounding communities within their various catchment areas. So on page 10, we look at the total secondary pupils of the board and fee paying. Unfortunately, here we don't see such a good news story. We do see that all our actual financial year ends, we've had declining enrollment to the end of 17-18. When we examined what we've used in our current year for estimates and revised, even if we were to end with what we have used in revised at 4,245, essentially we would still be a declining board at the secondary panel. And then we see the estimates that were used for the upcoming school year. Of course, we're concerned with this pattern because of also some of the changes in terms of the funding and how it's affecting secondary school funding as we move forward, not only into 19-20, but the future years as well. So hopefully, maybe to 18-19 would be our lowest value, and we'd actually start to see an increase as we move forward. So as information becomes available in our next cycles, we'll start to see whether or not that will come to fruition. So in terms of our secondary fee-paying students, we see essentially a little bit of variation, but not substantial over the course of the last few fiscal years, as well as the estimates that were used, as well as the estimates that's used going forward. So we see relative stability for our fee-paying students at secondary. So just to recap, and this was presented at the January meeting, in terms of the Ministry of Education, the capital funding commitments that were committed to the board in the past. And essentially, this is, again, a duplication and the extract of the letter we had received from the Ministry of Education dated August 4th, 2017, of which they had committed to the projects, 5 projects that are listed. And of course, as we speak today, we have completed only the 1 project, which is the last project, the Confederation Secondary School Gym Addition. For the rest, we are still waiting for our approval to proceed for construction, And the director and I did have a telephone conversation with the ministry yesterday afternoon. We spoke with Nancy Naylor, who is the deputy minister, and Joshua Paul, who is the assistant deputy minister. We were hoping, for some good news in terms of green light on these projects. It did not occur, although we did have a good conversation, and we took the opportunity to explain the importance of these projects and the work that went into it, and how we're relying on these projects to assist us in moving forward, particularly as we're facing more and more financial challenges on the operating side. So Nancy did confirm to us that we are considered, quote, a board in good standing, both in terms of how we deal with the capital branch as well as the financial branch of the ministry. So, of course, that's always good to hear. And she encouraged us to maintain regular contact with them to get updates on our projects. So they are working through all the changes that have occurred with the change of government. And it's been a slow process, and they recognize it, and they were receptive to a bit of our frustration, and were as supportive as they could be. In terms of what else is new,
Trustee Morrison, question.
May not have an answer for this, Dennis, but through you, Madam Chair, just wondering, the approval for these capital projects, I won't go through the history. Everybody around this table is aware it was after extensive two-year accommodation review in a variety of our catchment areas, and a lot of involvement with parents and school communities. A lot of expectations have been set up. Some were disappointed by the results. Some were looking forward to these results. But at a board basis, as you've already indicated, Dennis, this was going to allow us to achieve our ongoing operational cost efficiencies that were needed as our budget gets reduced. And so are they aware of the fact that with approval given for all of these projects, after going through extensive consultation, after disrupting families and schools, that we've now missed almost 2 years for sure, perhaps 3 seasons of construction, and the resulting increase in construction costs that also go with that? Are they aware of that?
yes, and we did point that out to them, that essentially, based on information dating back to 2017, essentially all these consolidations and the new schools would be opening or have opened by September of this year, 2019. Therefore, yes, we stressed that point as best we can, and they were empathetic at the time, but still saying that they are doing their best from their end to work through the new requirements based on the new government.
One supplementary, Madam Chair?
And
Because, thank you, Dennis, and I appreciate the difficulty, and this is somewhat, you're just repeating to us what you were told, and I know our staff are doing everything to move these projects forward. But it does mean, based on that conversation, I'm glad you're remaining optimistic, and or at least not off the list. They're saying, no, we're still anticipate giving you the go-ahead. So I'm glad, I'll take that at face value, Dennis, so thank you to you and to Norm for going down to have that meeting to press our case. But we're still now looking then at the earliest, not beginning these projects till next construction season. We're talking about next summer already, so it's another year at minimum.
And I will, as we go through the various planning areas, provide additional information and comments on that matter at hand. The other thing that is new is that the ministry did release a B memo in the later part of July, actually launching the next phase of capital priorities program, therefore asking boards, what are your new requirements moving forward? So we did seek clarification that the 1920 capital program is completely separate from the projects that are currently in the queue and on the docket for review and approval by the ministry. So there's no need to go back and reiterate that these are important projects to us. And we did take the opportunity to make sure they understood, and we essentially, the director and I, ranked the projects, the remaining projects that the consolidation of schools and transformation of Chelmsford into a JK-12 is a priority, and of course the new French immersion school in New Sudbury is the highest of the priorities. So we took that opportunity so that at least they gave them context if they had to quote, pick and choose and prioritize, they'd be working with our priority. So in terms of the new program, boards are being asked to submit their requests by the end of September, which is a very short turnaround as well. And the content of the new program is it cannot include any projects that would require school consolidations. So almost an exact opposite to what happened in 2017 when the emphasis was on reduction of excess space and opportunities to consolidate. So completely the opposite. And therefore, as we go through the planning areas, we do plan on making submissions and would welcome any comments from trustees as we go through as well.
Excuse me, Trustee Morrison.
I could wait, I guess, Dennis, but I'm not going to. So just wondering, so it sounds to me, just based on what you said, that their priority is building for X because you have a lack of capacity,
That is certainly one of the criteria.
as opposed to consolidating, reducing spaces. They're looking to provide capital funding where extra space is needed. So I'm assuming schools like RLBD hit the...
You are correct, yes, as well as any school buildings that truly are prohibitive to repair on their own and need to be rebuilt,
Okay, thank you.
or sections thereof,
Thank you.
yes.
Just if I could ask a question, although you may not be able to answer this as well, does this sound to you as if this is more slated towards Southern Ontario area because the growth is in Southern Ontario, and Northern Ontario boards are not exactly achieving overcrowded situations in our schools?
Well, I don't know if I could really comment that it's slated that way, although you'll see as we go through this evening, we do have needs that we would put forward as well. So perhaps they are experiencing more growth compared to Northern Ontario, but it doesn't mean there are not needs within Northern Ontario school boards either.
Thank you very much.
So page 14 essentially was childcare projects that are related to the previous page. So once again, this was an update that was provided to the board on April 24th, 2018. And essentially on this page, the projects, most of them are done except the three. So the Churchill, which is in the middle of the page, Larchwood and Little Current are still outstanding and not complete as we speak this evening, and will be included in the updates for the respective planning areas that's upcoming. So this slide was also presented in January, and it has not changed, and essentially just outlines that typically what happens is ministry makes the political announcement of commitment of dollars to school boards and projects. However, then you get into the administrative component of working with the capital branch to receive the quote approval to proceed, which then allows us to actually begin projects and construction. So none of this slide has not changed since January. So on page 16, operating budget, page 17, and we've touched on this, is the fact that one of the bigger initiatives that the ministry did implement was the school board efficiency and modernization strategy, and essentially that caused a significant loss of grant revenue over the course of a 3-year period. And we see that that complete loss over that 3-year period was in excess of $4.4 million, which is a perpetual amount, meaning that grant was lost forever. And therefore, it was brought into our discussions yesterday afternoon with the ministry how, on the one side, the grants are gone, yet on the operating side, we're essentially, for lack of a better word, handcuffed until we can see some of the consolidations materialized. So in terms of our planning areas, we'll review each one of them. We have our 8 planning areas, and they have not changed. They are a repeat of what was presented in the past. So we begin on page 20, which is our central planning area. And everything in black was what was presented in January, and the update is the writing that is in blue. So essentially, in January, we did have a motion, and the motion was to defer the transfer of the grade 7 and 8 students from Lansdowne into Sudbury Secondary. So that motion remains standing, and there are no changes to that, and essentially all schools in this planning area remain status quo for the 1920 fiscal year. There's no plan changes. In terms of Espanola, in January, we also had no changes planned for this planning area, and essentially that has not changed. It remains status quo. For Manitoulin Island, we presented an action plan that had 2 components in January. Essentially, those remain. So in terms of the update, it would be subject to the Ministry of Education approval to proceed. We would implement the childcare project at Little Current School, which was outstanding from the past. We would continue the revitalization project at MSS, and all other schools in this planning area would remain status quo. So in terms of New Sudbury, and there are many components to New Sudbury and many existing motions, and there is a summary page for New Sudbury on page 29, but I will go through each of the slides just so that you have the context of what was presented in January and what remains as we speak this evening. So we have motions that date back to February 7, 2017, and we've had over the course of a few fiscal years updates to those. So if we go to page 24, we see that in January, we did have a motion that the new French immersion school, essentially, the implementation date be changed to September 1st, 2021, essentially a 2-year period, subject to the Ministry of Education approval to proceed, and that remains unchanged from that meeting. So then we also had on page 25 in February 2017 motion related to transfer grade 7 and 8 students into LaSalle Secondary School, and we had various updates since then. And if you turn to page 26, we see that we had the motion that essentially changed the date, and that the grade 7 and 8 students are scheduled to be transferred into LaSalle from Carl Nesbitt and from Churchill, and that remains unchanged. Our goal is to have that occur for September 1st of 2020.
Trustee Morrison.
Through you, Madam Chair, Dennis. So that's about 300 students from Churchill and Nesbitt will for sure then still be going over September 2020.
Correct.
And the work at LaSalle internally is still continuing to receive those students?
Yes, we've continued to progress and do internal changes within the context of LaSalle Secondary, and that is ongoing as we speak.
Thank you.
And will continue over the course of the upcoming fiscal year as well.
Thank you.
Trustee Gibson.
Thank you, Chair Dua. Regarding the construction of the new French immersion JK to grade 6 school, have you received any indication from the ministry? Obviously, we would have already done that design, and now they're talking about modular design and making new builds similar across the province. So have they given any indication of, I know we're waiting any day to hear about funding, whether they're going to continue or whether we'd have to look at reworking the design if if and when we do get the funding, or?
During our conversation yesterday, I asked that exact question because I was not sure based on the context in which they were presenting. However, it was clarified that that concept of standardization of whether it's modular or standard building plans is more related to the upcoming 1920 projects that will be requested under the new capital program. So they're essentially, the answer is no.
Perfect, thank you.
So on page 27, we see that it had a motion dated February 7, 2017 that talked about the revitalization of Churchill and transfer of the students from Cyril Varney. And we had various updates since then. And it would take us down to page 28, where we had a motion in January that changed that date as well to September 1st, 2021, and there's no update to that plan as we speak this evening. So in terms of an overall summary for New Sudbury, in terms of the major project, we would finalize the construction of the LaSalle Secondary School multi-use sports facility. And it's not written, but we would continue the interior renovations of LaSalle, which have been ongoing over the course of the current year as well as into next year in preparation for the transfer of the students. So for September 1st, 2020, we would see the transfer of the grade 7-8 students, which essentially is really the current grade 7 students going into grade 8, and it would be the grade 6 students going into grade 7 from Adamsdale as well as the other schools. For September 1st, 2021, that's where we have our plans, subject to the approval, for the new school to be open for September 1st, 2021, as well as the revitalization of Churchill and transfer of Cyril Varney for that date. In terms of Sudbury South, once again, there is a summary page on page 32 that will capture the content for the entire area. So in January, we had an action plan with 3 components. We had the issue of the childcare at Algonquin, the major project at Llewellyn, and the continued dialogue with the Ministry of Education as it relates to Monetteville Public School. We also had on the following page the board motion to approve the purchase of the 2 detached modular classrooms, one for Llewellyn and one for RLBD, and those are in place essentially as we speak in preparation for the beginning of classes next week. So in terms of overall summary for Sudbury South, we will continue the revitalization project at Llewellyn Park. And subject to ministry approval, we would look at the childcare project at Algonquin. And then under the new capital program, we would submit applications to the ministry for funding. And at this point, we're contemplating 3 submissions. One would be a new school for Monetteville Public School, which could fit into the criteria of modular construction and standard builds, as well as 2 options for RLBD. One is an addition to the existing school at the existing site, and one would be whether or not a new school could be considered for RLBD at the Llewellyn Park secondary site and introduce a campus model in the South End. So essentially, in terms of mechanics of what happens on the administrative level, is we've had preliminary discussions, we being Sandy Ackroyd, our manager of projects, and myself, with the capital people at the ministry, and this is where there's the informal exchange of just concepts to get a sense of whether or not things were being considered meet the criteria that the ministry is actually trying to focus on as we move forward. So far, we've floated these ideas, and they're not all new. We've had previous discussions, and so far they've been received with essentially that it fits within the criteria that the ministry is looking at, and that it's great that we're essentially considering various options, not just single options, to try and assist ourselves within the context of these two locations. Because you'll all recall that in the Noelville area, the French public did proceed with introducing a JK-12 school at the old high school. So that is changing the dynamics in that area a little bit with the coterminous French Catholic, and then of course we have our English public at Monetville. So the ministry is well aware, since we all deal with the same analysts at the Capital Branch.
Trustee Morrison?
Do the ministry officials that you're dealing with, Dennis, understand the implications then if that funding was provided to the French board for a JK-6 school in Noelville, JK-12 school in Noelville? What that does then when we're trying to do cooperative planning in small communities?
Yes, they're aware, because we had, you recall, I had advised the board that we, under a previous B memo from the ministry, they were inviting interest and submission by boards to work together for looking at options in the smaller communities. So we had submitted with French public and with French Catholic an interest. However, basically the feedback so far is, with the change of government, that whole approach is also was put on the back burner, not officially canceled to our knowledge. And essentially what happened with the French public is they had a building, and they worked essentially more or less within the context of that building to transform it from 7 to 12 to JK to 12. So it's not exactly a new school per se. It's an existing building, similar to essentially our approach with CVDCS, transformation. For Valley East, there are no changes planned, and that was the same as what was presented in January of this year. So then we get into Valley North, and once again, there are multiple pages and slides associated with Valley North, as there was much activity and motions that date back to February 2017, and there is a summary page on page 40 for this planning area. So then we deal with the first set of motions that spoke to the conversion of CVDCS into the JK-12 school. And in January of this year, we had the motion that changed the date to September 1st, 2020, and that remains unchanged from that board meeting. On page 35, we have motion R44, which spoke to the consolidation of Chelmsford Public into the renovated CVDCS building. And we had various motions, and in January, the last motion to be passed by the board was that the transfer of Chelmsford Public into CVDCS would be September 1st, 2020, and that remains unchanged. On page 36, we have the motion that dealt with the French immersion program at Levac, and in January, the motion was passed that the implementation date for discontinuing French immersion at Levac and offering the students the program at the new JK-12 school was changed to September 1st of 2020, and that also remains unchanged. On page 37, we had the motion that was passed in January about Levac Public School in terms of the right sizing of the school, which was part of those original projects approved by the ministry. And once again, waiting for subject to ministry approval to proceed on that one, and that remains unchanged as well. On page 38, we have the motion that the grade 7 and 8 students from Larchwood be transferred to the CVDCS building, the JK-12 school. And in January, we had a motion that changed the date to September 1st, 2020, and that remains unchanged from that date as well. And finally, we had, in terms of an action plan, the implementation of the childcare project at Larchwood, and once again, waiting for the ministry approval to proceed on this project, and there are no changes since the January board meeting.
Trust,
Through you, Madam Chair, again, Dennis, and I'm not sure that you will be able to answer this, but it's related to the childcare spaces, because I notice in a couple of these planning areas, we're including, of course, as part of our capital planning, that there would be the daycare spaces that would be included. There was one for Churchill and New Sudbury, there's one at the south end, and now we've got the Larchwood Daycare Center, daycare spaces, which we've talked about at this table for a while, because there was a need for daycare spaces there. The current provincial government, though, also in the last few months announced reductions to daycare funding. Do we know if that's going to be, I know the municipalities handle the allocation of spaces, but do we know whether our daycare spaces are going to be impacted then?
Well, essentially, the remaining daycare projects are subject to not only the Rainbow Board's position on the project, but even more so on the childcare providers, which are essentially the City of Greater Sudbury for Sudbury area. So therefore, the conversations that the ministry is having is not only with the Rainbow Board, but also with the city. And therefore, yes, it's quite possible that those projects are subject to the events that are occurring within the childcare portfolio on the City of Greater Sudbury side of the equation. So those conversations, again, once the summer period is over now, will come back on the table since everybody's more or less back at work, including ministry personnel. So those become part of the update discussions with the capital branch or the ministry. So once we, if we hear anything in the interim, of course, we'd bring those updates to the board. So on page 40, essentially, we see that it's the overall summary that our plan, as we speak this evening, is to implement many of the outstanding commitments for this planning area, and that a few of them, namely the conversion of CVDCS into a full-fledged JK-12, is subject to ministry approval and funding, as well as right-sizing LAVAC, as well as childcare, but other components are not. So we are remaining optimistic that if we are able to secure an approval to proceed in the upcoming months, the next 3 months especially, our focus would be to make this happen, excuse me, for this date. Now again, it could involve a phasing approach, that the focus would be what is the capital work that is required to ensure that we can transfer the elementary students into the building. So that would be the focus. And then subsequent to that would be, well, what are the other changes that are needed to address the secondary component of the students within that building? So once again, over the course of the next few months, hopefully good news will come, and the director will get the phone call with the green light, and then we can really start to solidify some of these plans.
Trustee Gibson?
Thank you, Chair Dewar. Do we have a contingency? Like, do we have, like, if we don't get the call, is there a plan B?
There is always a plan B, of course. The issue is, at this point, our focus is on obtaining the approvals and proceeding. And of course, we are in the background, Sandy and I, looking at, should we not see that positive answer in a timely fashion, is there anything we can do using our existing capital allocations, which is school condition improvement dollars that are assigned to the board, as well as any school renewal dollars, or whether or not we would need to come to the board for anything else. Given that it's a retrofit of an existing building, there's a little bit more flexibility compared to an outright new build like the French Immersion School.
Thank you.
So, Superintendent Bazinet, I want to thank you very much. You're not finished?
There's one more planning area.
Sorry.
Very short. West Sudbury, no changes planned. Everything remains status quo, and that, Madam Chair, is the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, and thank you for reminding me about this very important area. So I want to say thank you. It can certainly be seen from this kind of plan how dependent we are on the government of the day, and how the government of the day can impact the best laid plans of mice and men. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And moving on, we have the next item is the 2019-2020 Guide for Students and Parents, Guardians. So I'll call on the Director of Education, Norm Blazic.
Thank you,
Take
Madam
us through
Chair.
this.
And I'm just waiting for Nicole. She's going to walk us through it as well from a slide presentation perspective. But you probably should all have the guide with you. So I would ask that you pull it out, okay, and put it in front of you as we walk through. And the reason why I give it such emphasis, because every single parent will receive within our board, through their child, will receive this document. And it is one of the best go-to resources that the board has in terms of finding pertinent information. And so I think it's really important that we're all familiar with it. And we also invest a significant amount of time to ensure that the information that is put in there is not only valid, but it's very contextual. And it's a great resource for parents. Now, you'll notice we still have a written copy, which is very, it doesn't happen often nowadays, but we still think that it's still valuable to have the written piece. I will tell you there's a cost to it, but we see it as a resource that is necessary, and until I'm directed otherwise, we'll continue to do it. But we also will have this, of course, on the website. But let me walk you through it. So, students in Rainbow Schools in Sudbury, Espanola, Manitoulin will receive a guide for students and parent guardians the first week of school. The guide contains important information that will serve as a handy reference for parents and guardians and students throughout the school year. And in front of you, you have a copy of the 2019-2020 guide. Now, our cover photo sets the tone with a powerful message: commit to succeed. This photo was taken at the Challenge Meet. Coda, the child that's highlighted, is a student from Queen Elizabeth Public School. Now, I invite you to scroll through the pages of the guide with me. And of course, we begin, as always, with a message from the chair of the board and a directory of school trustees, including our student trustee. It's funny how you can get your picture in that quickly. So we continue on page 3 with key contacts. In administration, as well as administration. We also outline our vision, our mission, our value, and of course our priorities. Parents and guardians can access our strategic directions on the board website along with our annual reports. Now, pages 4 and 5, they highlight information about kindergarten, including the dates for the information nights in January of 2020, and as well as information about childcare, and which includes before and after school programs, and a list of early on child and family centers in our schools. On page 5, we've also included information about community use of schools. Our secondary school programs are highlighted on page 6, including Berrydown College and our adult day school. Note the new item. We will be offering an adult English language learning non-credit course for newcomers this winter. We've also added information about the Swakabuk Native Alternative School. The guide continues on page 7 with information about G Suite for Education, which gives students and teachers access to Gmail, Google Drive, and also a variety of applications for learning and teaching. We also provide digital monitoring tips for parents and guardians. And we remind parents and guardians to log on to rainbowschools.ca for news throughout the school year. We continue with the 21st century teaching and learning on page 8. Includes a focus on how students are being encouraged to be good digital citizens. On page 9, we highlight everything students and parents and guardians need to know about safe schools, including video surveillance, controlled access, use of the internet and electronic devices, definitions for lockdown, hold and secure, shelter in place, and internal hold and secure, which is a term specific to Rainbow Schools. We also provide information about our community threat assessment protocol. We also include the dates of our Wear Pink Days, the first of which will be on Thursday, September 12th, 2019. Page 10 highlights our work in equity and in inclusive education, which leads into the 10 character traits that are modeled, taught, and expected in Rainbow Schools. In the center of the guide, we have our code of conduct. It has been updated to include cannabis and vaping. On page 16, we highlight our work in Indigenous education. We have added information about our commitment to truth and reconciliation, including the strategic plan that was adopted by the board. We have listed the dates of FNAC meetings as well as Orange Spirit Day, or Orange Shirt Day rather, which will be marked on September 30th, 2019. Page 17 provides information on core French and French immersion. And we continue to promote the FSL Homework Toolbox at fslhomeworktoolbox.ca website, which remains a wonderful resource for our students and, of course, our parents and our guardians. Pages 18 and 19, we focus on special education programs and services. We've also included the schedule of meetings for SEAC. That's our Special Education Advisory Committee. On pages 20 and 21, we provide an overview of how we are engaging students in new and innovative ways at the secondary level. The specialist high skills major being offered in our schools continues. And as we turn to the next page in the guide, you will see the date for our annual transition evening for students going into grade 9. We have also updated the help with math homework section. The revitalization of Rainbow Schools continues on the next page with information about Manitoulin Secondary School and Llewellyn Park Secondary School. We have also updated the implementation dates for projects and program changes affecting schools in New Sudbury and Valley North. We also provide the link to access drinking water reports online. Pages 24 and 25 focus on parental involvement, including information about board-wide events, the Positive Parenting Program, School Council, and the Parent Involvement Committee. On October 29th, we will present the documentary Screenagers in the Sheridan Auditorium of Sudbury Secondary School at 7 o'clock. On page 26, we have focused on allergies and asthma and includes an overview of the plan of care developed for each student with anaphylaxis, asthma, diabetes, and of course, epilepsy. On page 27 features our mental health strategic plan, which was adopted by the board last fall. Mental health and well-being are fundamental for student achievement. And as you turn the page, we have information about the My Blueprint Education Planner and Rainbow International. New this year is the section on the School Cash Online, an easy way for parents to pay for school activities and events. The guide concludes with important dates, the school year calendar, and of course the directory of schools. Under board meetings on page 30, we indicate the regular board meetings in the Ernie Checkris boardroom, which are live streamed and archived at rainbowschools.ca. The guide for students and parent guardian is also available on our website in an accessible format. So that, Madam Chair, is at the conclusion of the walkthrough. But I think it's really important to note that for many of our parents, this resource, especially when it comes to safe schools, is critical because it really, really outlines the information that is aligned with how we expect everyone to act within our schools. And so it is incumbent upon us to make sure that it is communicated, and this is one format that we've used in order to do so. The other piece I just wanted to mention, I want to thank Executive Council and all their support staff, and of course, supporting Nicole in putting this together. It takes a lot of work during the summer in order to get this together, and so I really appreciate and extend my best thanks to all the staff that were involved, and especially Nicole. So thank you. Madam Chair?
Thank you very much. Director Blazik, I would like to add, on behalf of the trustees, a very special thank you to Nicole and to everyone who helped. And I know something like this is not put together by any one person. It takes a huge team of dedicated people to do that. But I think it is very much appreciated by our parents and guardians and by the community. Along with it, I'm just going to mention this handy card that we provide, and I know there are additional cards that can be had, and it shows the school dates, and on the back it's got every school and the school phone numbers, so it's extremely helpful. But once again, our Rainbow District School Board website is just a plethora of knowledge and information that we love to share with everyone. I'd now like to call on the director once again to go through the 2019-2020 Executive Council portfolios and family of schools.
So, and you should have sheets that identify Executive Council to that very name, 2019-2020. This is an annual distribution. This year you're going to find, of course, this is your first year being exposed to it. This will be new to you, but for those of you who are repeating, you'll see very quickly that not much has changed. If I walk through it, and you'll see at the very top, of course, on the first page, you'll see the director, of course, and the responsibilities associated with it, and of course, my exec assistant being Heather. Then you're followed by the superintendent of business with Dennis, of course, maintaining all of the various portfolios that he had last year. The academic superintendents, with the exception of only assigning, there's two changes in terms of exec assistants. Okay, that's the only change. So basically, Superintendent Noble and Superintendent Watchnuck flipped admin assistants. Okay, the one other piece, though, you might notice if you go down to the bottom where you see Kathy Watchnuck, Superintendent Watchnuck's, you'll see that Spark is no longer a part of her portfolio. Spark has kind of run its course at this point, and so the numbers have just dropped off so significantly in terms of the community piece. Okay, when I say community, it's about staff and employees. And the other piece is we're also trying to reestablish something else in a new format for our schools. We're not detracting away from the physical fitness piece, because that is huge, okay? Because the research, just because you don't see Spark there doesn't mean we're not still pushing the momentum about how important the physical education is. And not just physical education, but how physical movement, how it impacts academic learning is still critical for us. And we still use John Rady as a source for informing us moving forward. So we haven't forgotten that part. It's just that we no longer have Spark in terms of an extracurricular activity for after school hours. So just so you're aware of that. So everything else is pretty much the same. As you know, throughout the course of the year, we are inundated with different policy recommendations or procedures, and we try to implement them within the various portfolios that are here. The ministry, often you will hear them say, they want the board to develop a policy. Well, you create policy, and you already have 16 policies, okay, that form the basis of which we work from. What they're really asking us to do is to create procedures. Okay, and that's our job, to make sure that we have procedures in place to make sure that we fulfill the mandates that the ministry is speaking to. For example, the physical and health of education. Okay, and we'll be speaking more about that in a few minutes. But I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that. So that, Madam Chair, is the gist of the Exec Council for 2019-2020. With one exception, you'll notice Shining Tree is not on here anymore. Okay, so Shining Tree has now been removed. Okay.
So thank you very much, Director Blazik. Current expenditures borrowing resolution. I will read the motion. Motion that the current expenditures borrowing resolution as attached be deemed to have been read 3 times and approved. Moved by Trustee Hunda, seconded by Trustee Morrison. Trustee Gibson, and then Trustee Morrison.
Thank you, Chair Dewar. I was just wondering, for the benefit of those of us who are new, if we could just have a brief explanation of what this actually means. I've seen it come up and there's been no discussion, we just vote on it, so it seems to be just a formality, but just a little bit of background. Thank you.
Superintendent Bazinet.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, absolutely. Essentially, this is an annual occurrence, and what it's doing is it's essentially establishing a line of credit, should we need it, in terms of meeting our operating obligations. So, for example, if there was a timing difference between when we would receive our revenue from the Ministry of Education and our various payroll cycles, if ever we were in a situation where there would be a shortfall, we would draw on this line of credit essentially to meet our obligations, and then of course everything resets itself with the revenue stream that we receive from the Ministry of Education.
Thank you. Trustee Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that was sort of my question. But I just want to point out, I think in several years ago, this was a bigger deal because of the delay in getting funding from the province. But now that they provide funding on a more regular basis throughout the fiscal year, this is less and less of a concern. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Excuse me. The next item on the agenda is OBSPA fees. Motion that the 2019-2020 membership fees in the Ontario Public School Boards Association be approved. Moved by Trustee Clement, seconded by Trustee Cosmerly. There is backup. Did anybody, I hope everybody has taken a look at it. It indicates the kind of things that OBSPA does, and also how they arrive at the fee. Trustee Morrison.
Just again, a brief comment, and what's changed from in the past is OBSPA now has a formal role officially as our central negotiator on behalf of the boards. So I think it's pretty important that we pass our membership into the organization. Thank you.
Yep. All in favor? I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Ontario Public School Boards Association once again has indicated the 2019 Northern Region Meeting and Program. Motion that the board approve the attendance of the following trustees at the OBSPA 2019 Northern Region Meeting and Program, and this year it's in Thunder Bay, October the 4th and 5th. Is there anyone that wants? Judy Cosmerly, Carrie St. Jean, Bob Clement, Judy Hunda. Thank you very much. All in favor? Moved by, no, I need a mover, sorry. Need a mover and a seconder. Trustee Stringer, moved by Trustee Stringer, seconded by Trustee Clement. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Requests for leave of absence, there are none. Oh, sorry. Oh, I missed it, sorry. Motion that Trustee DeBazic be granted a leave of absence from the August 27th, 2019 board meeting. Moved by Trustee Cosmerly, seconded by Trustee Morrison. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Call on the director for the director's remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So good evening, everyone. And again, welcome back. We're very excited and, of course, energized to get the new year underway. Just a reminder, our kindergarten camp is in full swing, and staffs are gearing up for a course of great 2019-2020 school year. I can tell you that we also hit the road running as of yesterday, as we've had our new staff orientation at Larkabee Composite School. So approximately 75 staff, and we say new, but if you missed last year and let's say you started in September or later, you would have had to have attended the new staff orientation for this round. So that's why the number seems so large. But we had approximately 75 staff that were provided with a full range of Rainbow board information. And as well, yesterday at the board office, we had meetings that were related to mental health training, and they were for our custodians. So we're making sure that we touch all facets of our personnel. Last week, we also had our principals in 2 full days of training as it relates to the new cannabis laws and regulations, and this was provided by Keel and Cottrell. Secondly, we had PD related to School Cash Online. As you know, it'll be implementing starting next week. And finally, we had PD as it relates to equity and bias. So 2 full days for our principals last week, so they hit the road running as well. And as well, just after we ended last year, that day we did not know what our EPO was going to be with regards to the renewed math strategy. So we did receive the money, and they unveiled their math initiative. Rainbow received just over $580,000. This is about $100,000 less than the previous year. Okay? And so while we've had a few staffing challenges associated with the EPO, and it's related to secondary staffing, and of course that new attrition clause, and we've got to work some things out there. We're still quite happy the fact that we got this money, but it's problematic in terms of how we implement the staffing component. So we're trying to work with the ministry to see how that works out. As for the new physical health and education curriculum, we have just started to review the implementation process. You heard it like I did. In fact, you may have heard it before I did when it came out, because it came through the news media before the school boards heard about it. And we had to access it online, just like most people did. And of course, Superintendent Noble will be facilitating the implementation of this new curriculum and a civics curriculum, new civics curriculum, over the next few months. So there'll be lots more to come. And of course, this Friday, hopefully I'm not stealing any thunder for I am, sorry. Of course, this Friday is a big day for us, as we'll be signing our ESA, or Education Service Agreements, with our First Nations partners. And this is to be held in Whitefish at the Atikamekw Anishinaabe Community Center, beginning at 11 o'clock. And of course, if you wish to attend, please advise Heather, so that just we know. Love to have you there. Okay? So we're quite proud of that, the fact that we will have our ESAs signed off. Okay? Also, just a reminder that you should you receive calls from parents about transportation challenges, I would ask that you defer these to Dennis. Secondly, a reminder to all trustees that the teacher staffing is adjusted to reflect new realities of enrollment once the numbers are verified. So what does this mean? Typically, these adjustments to staffing are at individual schools, and they occur typically in the 2nd or 3rd week of schools, and typically at the elementary. Okay? September 30th is, and why is this really important? Because September 30th is a deadline. Okay, and September 30th deadline is we must submit a primary class size. Okay, and so we must fit the parameters of that class size requirement, and also the collective agreement requirements. So it's really important that we get our numbers straight by the end of the 2nd or 3rd week of September. And if we have to adjust, we will introduce or transfer folks. Not very often do we transfer folks from school to school unless there's a huge decline in the enrollment. However, if there's a huge enrollment that maybe we didn't anticipate, typically by the end of the 2nd or 3rd week, we will assign a new person to that school, a new staff member to that school. Now, as much as we love to receive new folks, sometimes it creates a little bit of anxiety because kids just get settled in, and sometimes we have to readjust the timetables and, of course, the staffing allocated to those classes. And so it can be somewhat disconcerting for children and also for parents, because they feel like they just kind of started a routine, right? But kids, we found out from year to year that even after we make these adjustments, kids are so resilient, much more resilient than us. and they adapt very, very quickly, but it's necessary that we do this in order to meet the class size requirements within our system. Because if you don't meet those class size requirements, you're penalized. And it's not a good hit. It's quite a financial hit. So finally, I'm looking forward to visiting schools with the trustees, and I would like that if you could please notify Heather if you're not able to attend on those dates. And I believe I sent those dates out at the beginning of July. And again, I want to thank you for your commitment to education and the community we serve, and I hope that this year will bring about huge success for our students, our families, and our staff. And I'm just so thankful that we can have a great start as we have this year. So again, thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Director Blazek. Wonder if the OBSPA delegate has anything, and I just want to take a second to make sure that everybody is aware. I did send out to all of the trustees a report from the AGM that Trustee Cosmerly had written up, so I hope if you get a chance, makes for good reading. Did you want?
Just quick, when the first meeting of the directors is September 27th, 28th. I'll be there for that.
Trustee Cosmerly?
Just a couple of things I wanted to add further
Sure.
to the notes that I sent to everyone. So I did attend the Canadian School Board Association Congress and the OBSPA annual AGM in Toronto, July the 4th to 6th. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them with respect to the notes. I also encourage trustees to read the OBSPA annual report for 2018-19, and it's on their website. And a couple of pieces I wanted just to add quickly about the conference itself that were not in my notes. I had the opportunity to hear two amazing keynote speakers, Dr. Gabor Mate, who is world-renowned for his work on stress and on addictions, and Mr. Brian Woodland, who is a former communications director at Peel District School Board. Dr. Mate's talk was especially thought-provoking. He spoke about why child attachment to nurturing adults, including teachers, is so critical for healthy growth and for development. His talk was based on a book he co-wrote, which I bought and which he signed, called Hold On to Your Kids, Why Parents Need to Matter More Than Peers. What he was talking about was the negative impact that there can be on children if they are more attached to their peers when they are young than to nurturing adults. So if anyone ever wants to read up on what he was talking about, I encourage you to read the book. Brian Woodland's keynote focused on trustees as leaders, a very different approach. But it was very upbeat, whereas Dr. Gabor Mate is very down to earth and very serious. But it was an excellent conference. I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
No, I understand from Trustee Cosmerly that there is a very small charge to rent that book from you. Is that right? Thank you very much. Now, I don't want to put you on the spot, Colleen, but I do want to give you an opportunity. Trustee Colleen, if you would like to say a few words.
Yeah, I can definitely say a few words. So first off, I'm really excited to be part of the board. Secondly, I will be attending a conference on the 22nd of September because I will be co-chairing the Student Achievement Working Group as part of OSTA, the Ontario Student Trustee Association. I will also be the North Region representative of the Public Board Council.
So what is the date of the conference? Do we have a board meeting prior to that? No, but we need a motion. September 24th is the next board meeting. So would you like to just take a second and see if you could write up that motion, and we'll put it on the floor. It's not a problem. It's not a problem. No,
Madam
no.
Chair, I was going to say, part of me had remembered that perhaps we'd already passed it, but I will take the in June. But if not, basically, the motion is just that we approve the
Yes.
attendance of
Yes.
student trustee Colleen Govro to the
Yeah.
upcoming Ontario Student Trustee
That's
Association
it.
meeting on September 22nd. I'll
Yes.
happily move it.
Thank you very much. Motion is moved by trustee Morrison, seconded by trustee Hunda. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Colleen. We look forward to working with you, too. Trustees' remarks. Trustee Hunda, and then trustee Morrison.
I just wanted to mention how proud we are of our trustees from the Rainbow Board, our student trustees, because they all take such an active part in their provincial group, and I think that really shines a good light on us, and I want to thank you, Colleen, for being prepared to do that as well.
Trustee Morrison.
I was just going to ditto that, because again, we've got lots to live up to, Colleen. You haven't even sat in a seat for one meeting, and you're already chairing a provincial group. Thank you. That's all, Madam Chair. Ditto.
Thank you. Trustee Gibson.
Thank you, Chair Dua. I had a question for the chair regarding the Audit and Accountability Fund that was announced by the provincial government. I believe a letter was sent out to chairs of school boards on May 29th. I haven't personally seen the letter, but I was just wondering, I'm assuming we're not applying because it would require a board motion and there isn't one on the agenda tonight. So I was just looking for maybe a little bit of background about the fund and why we decided not to go ahead, or if we are going ahead. Thank you.
If I receive any communications from the ministry or from other boards that are directed to the chair, I put them in the correspondence envelope. Do you have anything to say on this, Director Blazik? Excuse me.
All I can say at this point is boards who were challenged in terms of trying to find the savings that were required, because you remember at the beginning of this process, when they announced the 28-1, many boards were saying that financially they could not make it. And as part of this challenge, the ministry, of course, brought forward an application process where you could apply for an auditor to come in and support boards in terms of trying to find whatever savings they could. To date, there have been I can tell you, very little intake. Very few boards. I think I only know of one in the public system, English public, that has taken that on, and it was specific to transportation. And so but most boards have not, because we are audited from so many different sectors as it is, both from an internal and external perspective, from our regional auditors plus our own auditors, and we're not suspect, but we're also from various ministries. We have audits throughout the course of a year, and in the last 5 years we've had various components audited. So it's if you wanted to, most boards have decided not to. We don't see the need for that at this particular time, but that option is still out there, and I think OPSPA and the ministry are still saying it is available should you choose you want to go there, but we have not leaned in that direction.
Supplementary, if I may.
Trustee Gibson.
Yes, you're correct, Director Blazik. They have extended the deadline to August 30th, so that's why I was asking, because it's coming up. And just to clarify Chair Dua's remarks, so you did not receive a copy of the letter? It was not sent to you?
It's not ringing a bell. I have heard of it, and I know of it, but you mentioned the date, and if I did get it, it's in there.
Well, I did check the
And
letter, so.
yes, I know of it. I know of it. Yep.
And supplementary to Director Blazik, if I may. So did you receive a copy of the letter, or how do you know about it?
Well, we've received notice from both, from the ministry, and of course everybody's heard it through the newspaper, and of course the Council of Directors has also identified it as a source should you want to receive it. And I can't recall, Dennis, I'm looking at you, was there an actual B memo to that regard?
No, it was not issued as an official Ministry of Education B memo to the financial component of school boards. It was essentially a letter addressed, I believe, to a board chairperson. And as well, we were subject to getting copies. Maybe I would just like to add that when we had our discussion earlier this evening about our capital and accommodation plan, we clearly have been having this ongoing discussion with the ministry that if they truly are serious about assisting this board in meeting its operating commitments, it stems from giving us the approval to proceed on our capital request, because then things tend to fall into place as we've outlined for the board over the past 2 years. So I think at this point, our focus is if we can get these projects and these consolidations, it puts this board in a good standing from a financial operating perspective.
Thank you, Superintendent Basney.
And thank you. Anything else? So, chairperson's remarks. School is off to an early start for the Rainbow District School Board's youngest students. As children begin school this fall, as children who are beginning school this fall are currently participating in the kindergarten camp. The 9-day program, which continues until Thursday, that's 2 days from today, is offered 3 hours a day at a number of Rainbow schools. Under the guidance of qualified teachers and designated early childhood educators, kindergarten students are engaging in inquiry-based learning and play, including cooperative games and outdoor activities. There is still time to register for the 2019-2020 school year in both our elementary and our secondary schools, offering English and French immersion. Parents and guardians and students are encouraged to contact the Rainbow School in their area. Please note, the day after Labor Day, Tuesday, September 3rd, is a professional activity day. Therefore, the first day of school is Wednesday, September the 4th, and there is no early dismissal that day. The Adult Day School, located at Sudbury Secondary School, offers a variety of free high school credit courses for adult learners 21 years of age or older who want to complete their Ontario Secondary School diploma and prepare for apprenticeships, college, university, or the workplace. And I always have a section where I ask you to circle your calendars, and the first circle I want you to make on your calendars is Friday, August the 30th, and I'll piggyback on the invitation from Director Blazek. That is the day when we will be signing the education service agreements. And we are also going to have the launch of the board's Truth and Reconciliation Commitment to Action Plan. This is a plan that has been worked on throughout from 2018 and 19, and we're very pleased to be able to bring it to this occasion. And once again, if you can possibly come, trustees are very welcome, and just let Heather know so that we can plan. Staff and students, the next day I want you to circle is Thursday, September the 12th, when staff and students in Rainbow schools will be wearing pink as Rainbow District School Board marks its 12th, September the 12th, and this is the 12th anniversary for Stand Up Against Bullying Day. We invite everyone in the community to join with us and wear pink. On behalf of trustees, I would like to welcome all students and parents, guardians to Rainbow Schools and the start of another exciting school year. The mission of Rainbow Schools and its staff is to bring learning to life in English and French immersion from kindergarten to secondary school. We also strive to instill in students the values that build responsible and respectful citizens who care about each other and the world in which they live. As always, parents and guardians are encouraged to take an active interest in their child's education. Piggybacking on what Trustee Cosmerly said, parental involvement improves student achievement. We also welcome community partners to help us mentor and nurture their future workforce. When the home, the school, and the community work together, we maximize learning opportunities for students and help them achieve their full potential. The thought for this month comes from an American journalist and politician. His name is Harding Carter Jr., who said, "There are two lasting bequests we can give our children. One is roots, but the other is wings." Thank you very much. Just take a minute to take a look at future meetings. Anyone who sees a mistake there, we can get it corrected now, or make sure you call Heather if you feel there is something. So I thank you very much once again this evening, and that we do now adjourn, moved by Judy Hunda, seconded by Trustee Hunda, seconded by Trustee Morrison. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.